Practical Experience podcast. I am Michael, your orator and originator, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. So I want y'all to know that this visual podcast has not gone off without a hitch. It has not. It has been truly testing me in every way I can possibly be tested, from the lighting, from the microphone, cameras, everything that could happen has happened in trying to make this podcast come to fruition. So I hope y'all are really enjoying it. And thank you so much for rocking with me. Angles have been slightly up, slightly down, lighting been too bright, maybe too dark. But you all are witnessing the greatness of this podcast come together. And once we finally get it together, it is going to be even more amazing than it already is. But stay focused on what you need to focus in on, okay? Which is me and the content that I'm delivering. Okay. So I want to talk to you all about something very special that I've been working on. If you've been listening to the episodes throughout, some of you will know that I have been talking about this book. Now, this book has been a labor of life. I'm going to say it's a labor of life and love because years ago, probably over 15 years ago, I said that I was going to write a book about my life because I felt like so many things happened to me along the way. And I was like, nobody would believe that these crazy things happened to me, right? From the early ages of like 19 up until almost 40. Just things happen, friendships, relationships. I found myself getting in situations that were similar to situations I had before. And I was like, how do I keep coming back here? How do I find myself repeating the same cycle, the same lessons again? And so at each point in my life, I wrote it down, right? That was kind of like my creative outlet. I've always been a writer, not professionally, although we're doing that now. I just did not do it professionally. I just was like writing things in journals and on napkins and on all these things. And so when I tell you, I came into my home one day just really trying to figure out what was next for me in life. I was like, Lord, what is next? What is the door that you're going to have me walk through? I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like I'm missing something. And the book came up in my mind similar to this podcast when God gave me the word for the podcast. And I was like, no, I don't want to do the podcast because I had already done Facebook Lives for a number of years and I talked about everything that I feel like I could talk about. And so, although I didn't reach millions of people or even the high thousands of people, uh, uh, about 7,000 people at the beginning were a part of my community. And then later on, I think it grew to about 17,000 in my Facebook community. And so I didn't really know what else I could do after the pandemic because I had spent more time with people than I had ever spent on the internet. I've spent more time on the internet than I ever did. And so I was cultivating this synergy and this relationship with people without even consciously realizing what was happening. For me, I am always trying to use my life lessons and all of my experiences to inform everybody else's because I want somebody else to have an easier path than I did. That is the work for me. That is the passion behind it. I feel like a lot of us wish that we had a manual or a guide to living life, the ups and downs, the goods, the bads, the in and out of relationships, trying to sift through feelings while also trying to sift through college, wayward family relationships or wayward family dynamics. And so nobody really wants to talk about the things because sometimes it's embarrassing. Sometimes it's embarrassing. I've had moments where I've been like, "Oh Lord, I don't know if I want to talk about that in my family." But I talk about it anyway because to reveal it is the only way to heal it, in my opinion. You can't cure what you can't see. And so, or what you won't acknowledge having. It's kind of like people who won't go to the doctor. You know something is wrong with you, but you don't want to go and get the diagnosis and get the prescription. So, life to me is like that in a lot of ways. And so, one of the consistent themes that showed up in my work is life lessons. It showed up in everything that I had written. And I even had an outline of a book that I was going to call Life Lessons. Mind you, this was again over 15 years ago. So I had this idea in me. This was a God dream, a God given assignment. It was in me a long time ago. And I have some pieces that are like late 90s that I have a date on that I've written. And I've always been kind of inspired, but I think the reason why I forgot about it and didn't pursue it is because I was always taught that it wasn't a practical profession. Now, despite there being writers out there that are very famous now, and probably had I, taken some of that, and decided to do what I should be doing, I would have been a lot further, a lot faster. But I needed the life journey and the life lessons so that I could complete my assignment. And so everything happens for a reason, which I talk about in my book. So I'm very excited, you guys. The proofs for the book came today. So the proofs came today. This is my book, One Day at a Time, Life Lessons in Love. You see the strip on here. These are my proof copies. That's why it says that. But you will get a regular book in paperback or hardcover, whichever one you decide to do. This book will be available on themichaelexperience.com and also on Amazon for those of you all that shop at Amazon. So the book really takes you on a journey. It really takes you on a journey from some of the very first mistakes that started forming and shaping bad habits, and some of the love that I chased, or sometimes the love that chased me, and then I had to chase it away. You know what I'm saying? But this book goes through all of those things, and so bringing it back to bringing this back to recent, right? I was at home minding my business, again, trying to figure out what was next for me, praying, trying to manifest, trying to talk myself into going back to corporate and all these things. And so the first thing that came back to me was the podcast. I told you about that in the episode. But after that got off the ground, after this got off the ground in the audio version, I was like, well, Lord, is it the video podcast is next? And I don't want to do that. And to be quite honest with you all, I didn't want to do a video podcast because it is so much work. It is so much work. The camera, the lighting, all the things that I talked about, going a ride a day, getting the right angles and stuff. Because listen, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I don't like every angle that I'm filmed from. Some angles make me look like Mr. Potato Head, and I just can't do it. You know what I mean? I want to be seen in the way in which I see myself. Mostly. But there's a lot that goes into it, and then people get lost in the imagery and the outfits and the nails and the all the things or whatever. And so I just didn't want to get caught up in the minutia of the imagery of it all and the expectation of it, right? Especially since people know me to be so passionate. But I had to get out of that. I had to tell myself, you can't get caught up in those thoughts, because if you do, you'll be doing the very thing that you didn't want others to do. And that is going to stop you from your greatness. So, however you decide that you're going to show up in the world, that is how you show up on your podcast. And so, going through this whole identity change and metamorphosis at this period of my life, almost 40, um, it's just been very jarring. It's been a very jarring experience. From I don't like the same clothes. My eating habits are completely different. Where I want to go is completely different. The type of man that I want to be with is completely different. Well, it ain't completely different, but there are some key differences in there in the way that I feel about it. So life for me in every way has changed. The way I feel about corporate, the way I feel about wanting to do, things with my time, it's all different. And so I decided that, I was gonna write a book about it. I decided I was gonna well, I didn't really decide. I mean, me and God decided, okay? So, that is how this book came to fruition. But let me tell you, the moment that I knew I had to write this book, it's this little urge in me that just kept saying, the book, the book, the book. Now, originally, I thought to myself, like, Lord, what are you telling me? Because I've been reading books. I've been trying to catch up on some spiritual reading, and just also just some like some happiness stuff, like happy podcasts, like things that I can look forward to in my next chapter, trying to figure out, like, does that resonate with me? Does it feel like me? And so I feel my time and my energetic and spiritual space with the type of energy and the type of interactions that I want going forward, and if I don't know, or I'm unsure about something, that's what I'll just say, okay, let me try let me try this thing and let me try that thing. And so it's really been a journey of figuring it out. But One day I was here in my home and I was so fed up. I was so fed up. I was looking around. I'm like, Lord, I got this house. Lord, I got this car. I done all of this stuff. And I don't know what to do because for whatever reason, working and making money has always made me feel useful. It has always made me feel useful. I guess getting the paycheck solidified that the work and the know how that I have really meant something, right? In my mind. And so not having a traditional job made me feel like I wasn't living up to my usefulness. And so even though the podcast and even though, I had been writing kind of on and off, I just didn't feel useful. Even having accomplished, I did not. I was like, I have to do something, Lord. I got to do something that's going to give me a paycheck. Now I got bills to pay, but I was like, I got to do something. And so one day I was so fed up because I was like, it's been months. I'm running out of cash and I don't know what you want me to do. I have done everything that I can. I've applied to jobs. I've interviewed. Nothing seems to stick. It just seems like a complete mismatch every time. And so I was angry and I was crying and I was like, oh my goodness. And so this particular day I said, you know what, just get in the shower and I got in the shower and I think I did it in the quietness of it because sometimes you got to be still and be in the quietness. And so that's what I did. I was like, okay, we're just gonna be still in the quietness and we're gonna just figure it out. We're gonna have to figure it out like we always do. And when I came out of the shower, I put my robe on and I just started walking through each room in the house. And I started walking through each room in the house and I was like, okay, like, there's some gratefulness here, there's some gratitude in here, and there's also some very real, like, if you wanna keep your house, then you have to do something. And I talked about a moment of clarity I had in 2012 when a lady in a nursing home told me that I was wasting my time being a caregiver in a nursing home. She said, "You're wasting your time." She said, "You could be you are meant to be a CEO, you are meant to be up there doing big things." She's like, "I've worked with the best of them." And she's like, "What's stopping you?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't know, but I'm here because I need a job." And she said to me, "Do what you love and the money will come." And that just stuck with me. I think hadn't she said that, I probably would have forgotten about this conversation, but she emphasized, "Do what you love and the money will come." Now, when she said that, I had no idea what I loved. And although I had been writing since I was a kid, and I did it just innately and instinctually. Like I would find myself writing on napkins, writing on the back of a if you ever been to a nursing home or in a hospital setting, they have those paper things that paper mats that they put the food on so it doesn't mess up the table. And so I have a bunch of those that I've written on the back of. So I get inspired and I just write. But I forgot about it because like I said before, I was told that that wasn't a practical career, nor was I informed enough about it to really do any research because the internet was new when I was coming up. Now, some of y'all like Michael, Google's free. Well, Google wasn't around at the time. It was Ask Jeeves. It was Ask Jeeves at the time. Google came in y'all's age. This iPhone business wasn't happening. We had two-way pagers and we had T-Mobile sidekicks and Blackberries if we were rich. So all of this internet resource was not available to me at that time to really figure out like how can I become a writer is a very different time. And so my family, of course, coming from rural Indiana, Kokomo, Indiana, my family didn't really have a lens for anything outside of manufacturing and healthcare. That's what the majority of my family did, and some worked in the restaurant business. So nobody really talked to me about the possibilities. Nobody ever saw my gift and said, why are you not writing or why are you not doing, those things? And to be fair to my friends and family around me, they tried their best. They tried their best to encourage me to do things, but it was always things that, yes, they were hobbies for me, and yes, maybe I could do them well, but they weren't things I had any interest in, right? I used to dance. I'm not nowhere near choreography level dancing as far as like being a choreographer. I can bust a move. I can keep up with an 8 count if I need to, but to be on the road doing it, that wasn't for me. Then people told me I should be a model. Now, I think I look pretty decent, but I do not have the model. aesthetic in the face. The model aesthetic is very, very symmetrical, very something other than what I have. And I look nice, but it's if you know, you know, especially here in the States. Now I ain't gonna speak for everywhere else, but here in the States, the vision of a model is very different, and I don't fit it. Let's just say that, okay? I believe I look well, look really good. I look gorgeous, beautiful even by regular standards, but beauty model standards, it would be a no. But people used to tell me that because I was tall and a little lighter. Okay, fine. But I was like, yeah, no. Even if I did do that, it would be for fun. It wouldn't be because I would feel like that was the thing I could do for the rest of my life. So that coming back to do what you love and the money will come, I never really understood it in the way of like, what does that mean for me? But it stuck with me because I was like, I need to figure it out. I need to figure it out. But it never occurred to me that I took my writing craft and my writing passion with me everywhere I went. I didn't realize that until recently. Um, because when I looked back on the journey and I started wondering, like, how did I miss this? I was like, how did I miss it? I knew it was because there wasn't a space for it. I was like, there wasn't a space for it, so that's clear to me. But I was like, well, why wasn't that on my list of possibilities though? Because yeah, modeling, I remember talking about that. I remember, filling out an application for the Art Institute of Chicago. I remember doing I remember doing some of those things, but I was like, I don't know. What did I do with writing? I don't know. It was just like so unattainable, I guess, from what I understood about it. And I just didn't go for it. But then I know I'm taking you all over the place, but stay with me and play with me for a second. Um, but the day that let me go back and let me get us back on track. The day that I the day I got out of the shower and I was walking through my home with my robe on, and I was just feeling very defeated. I was feeling very low. I was like, Lord, I just don't know. I was like, I have no idea what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And I just need to know. Like, I need a sign. You got to give me a sign or something. So I'm walking in every room in my house and I come in this very room that you see where my plants are in here. You see, that's Magnus right there. Magnus is my biggest and my first plant there. She's a monstera. And then you have other way. And then you have Tina Turner there. Her name is Tina Turner because she's a survivor. Boy, I tell you, I had to go through some things to save her, but I found her at the Home Depot laying to the side and limp. So I saved her. Oh, gal. So I call her Teen Turner because she's a survivor. But all of my plants in here, but this is my calm room. It's nostalgic. As you can, if you've been getting into it, it's got those darker colors. I mean, not those darker colors, but it has those browner colors, those earth tones. Because when I was growing up, I used to go into certain people's homes and it was almost like I would think about a dashiki and a what are those things called? Dream catchers and the beads that would hang from the doors. And it was so different to go in somebody's house that had that, but even more so when they were a person that embodied their blackness. I'm just gonna say it. They embodied their blackness, and they were typically women. There were some men that did too. There was no, because there was at least one man that I know that had a similar setup. But I loved going into spaces like that because it felt so grounded. It felt so it didn't feel eccentric necessary, but I guess it would be eclectic in a way. But it was very nostalgic and inspiring and calming for me. So this is my calm room, and I kind of made this room up in that way. You've got the wicker thing over here. You got your browns. You've got your kind of like wood kind of situations. But anyway, I just wanted to give you a little description of the room. But I came in this room and I just sat down. I sat down right here and I just started looking around, and something told me to look at this wicker cabinet that I was just telling you about. Something said, go to the wicker cabinet. So I go over to the wicker cabinet and I start looking at what's in it and pulling it out. And there's photo albums in there. And I was like, oh, cute. But I have pulled out this like black folder. It's an accordion folder. I put out a black accordion folder. And lo and behold, in there was a stack of things that I had written, and so I started pulling those things out and I set it there initially and didn't think anything of it. But as I walked around the house, something kept telling me, go back to that room, go back to that room. And so I went back to the room. I looked at it, the book sitting there, the accordion file sitting there. I looked at the paper and the stuff that I had written, and I was like, "Are you trying to tell me something?" This is how I have my conversation with God. I'm like, "Are you trying to tell me something?" And so it just said, "Open it, read it." Y'all, I started reading the stuff that I had written, and I instantly it was like something reconnected in me almost immediately. I felt this warmth just take over my body. I felt these emotions just start just rising. It was as if my spirit was like, finally, you have come back to me. And to read some of the things took me right back to those moments in which I experienced them. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot all about this. But suddenly, when I read it, because the way I write things, I started feeling it all over again. And I was like, this is crazy. But the other thing about it is that so much of what was in there appeared to be lessons that I repeated in some form or another later in life. And there were certain things that I saw that reminded me of what was going on in my life today. And I was like, this has got to be the craziest thing. Well, if you ask for a sign, one that is undeniable, like I do when I pray, Lord, give me an undeniable sign, one that I cannot mistake, you know, um, the signs that you have written, the signs that are in your penmanship, the signs that are part of your pain and your passion and your pleasure in some instances, those are signs you really can't ignore. And so I began reading and I just started getting lost in the writing. And then something told me to put certain things together. So I had written chapters for books before. I'm like, I'm gonna write this book, and I'd write like 2 or 3 chapters. So there's a few books that are in this pile of mine. And but I was like, I'm gonna write this book, or whatever at some point. Anyway, so I started organizing them in the ways in which I was like this can go here, this can go here, and there was just this small stack of, I think it was 3 chapters, 3 or 4 chapters that stuck out to me. And I was like, I think this would be the basis for my book because they were the recurring themes. It was my relationships, the many relationships with men that I had engaged in, but I was like, there's something common about each one of these relationships. There is something that I have in common. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, those of us who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I have been saying that for the last few years for whatever reason. That saying, that quote just kept sticking with me over and over and over. And I was like, well, what lesson are you trying to teach me? And I didn't know what it was at the time. I was like, I guess I'm gonna figure it out. And so there were lessons in there. I said, "Oh, okay. I got it. I got it. We won't do that again with these men." Um, but there were other things too that were intersectional because not just with the men in my life in a romantic sense, but people in my life. I started seeing recurring themes of me trying to love them in a certain way and it not being received and the way that I felt coming out of it, I had to reshape a lot of these last few years, reshape the way that I feel about my connection with people and how they respond to me. And I had to reframe it because for a moment I was like, am I unlovable? And also, what is it about people that makes them feel like they can't reciprocate or shouldn't reciprocate? And I had to reframe my mindset and reshape my mindset around it because I realized I had a huge part to play in that operating standard with people because I would keep people at only so close of a distance, and when you put up that guardrail, that emotional wall, people only have but so much room to come in your space and really get to know you. And so I was controlling the way that people were able to love me, and I was putting parameters and restrictions um in those situations and in those things. I didn't know I was doing it. It was a defense mechanism for me because I always told myself that if nobody else took care of me, that I would. And somehow telling yourself these things, you feel like you're just giving yourself a pep talk. You feel like you're giving yourself affirmation and motivation. But at some point, you realize that you start living it out. And that shows up very differently in your actions with, to, and around other people. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And so it took me being upset with my brother and my mother and my sister for not showing up for me in a way that I hadn't taught them to show up for me, because I made it okay for them to just think that I would be fine because I kept you here. So how can I expect you to first know what you don't know, right? Because I haven't told you, I haven't taught you that operating standard with me. Um, but how do I then expect you to do anything? And so that was one of those lessons that I had to say, "Oh, got it. Got it." So that is depicted in the book because I feel like far too many times do we stay silent, we do the strong thing, we do the independent thing, we tell ourselves, "I got this, I can take on the world." And then when the world comes down around us and the world, it comes so far down on our shoulders that we can barely stand up straight, we think that people are gonna look at that and notice, number 1, the anguish that we're carrying inside. How do they know that? It's invisible. But we think somehow that people are gonna just know, and even more so, we expect that people are gonna show up. And what if we taught them to show up too? Nothing. We've always said, "We got it. We're strong. We can do it." So in one day at a time, I break down the moments, the many moments in every type of relationship that I've had, that I had to walk back that path and understand, how did I set up a parameter, a wall, a guardrail that caused people to exist on the outside of it? And when did I create the space for them to come into it in a different way? So that's in this book, as well as long as a lot of other good stuff. But going back to that moment that really made me feel, or really forced me to write the book, was, like I said, I was reading these chapters and I was reliving these moments, but I also knew that if I had been writing this book several times, I wrote specific chapters at several points in my life, that at some point, I said, at some point, this book has to happen. And each time this book is titled or themed in some way, it's always about life lessons and love in some form or another. Life lessons, love. It's littered in my poetry, it's littered in when I do the structure of the book. And so, to make this full circle, one day at a time became my mantra when I was empowering people in their journeys at work and in their journeys at life, because sometimes life just gets so hard and it gets so thick, and the mountain seems so tall that you can't mount it in any way, shape, or form. And so I would tell people, just take it one moment at a time. I was like, one moment at a time, one day at a time. I even would sometimes say 1 minute, 1 second, depending on how bad it was. But it was something that I kept repeating over and over and over to people. And when I started going through my change, my reflective journey, right? I started telling myself, Michael, you're not going to figure this all out in a day, or maybe even a week or a month. So you're going to have to take it one day at a time. One day at a time. That's it. The only moment that you know for sure is the one that you are in. The other ones have either passed already or have not come, and you don't know if it will. And so that is how I started living and processing through the moments, the love, the loss, the grief, the rediscovery, the identity jarring that happened, because this process is not one that is easy. This process of self rediscovery is not easy. I don't think it ever was from the beginning, right? The discovery phase, when you're coming out of, the cloud, so to speak, and the veil is lifted. You go from being a kid to, whoop, the real world is here. But I think even at those moments, it becomes very jarring because you feel like you are thrown to the world and you have to figure it out. And it's no different for me at nearly 40 years old because I'm leaving a version of myself behind that has carried me for so long. But the intersection or the in between, as I like to call it, the meantime, in between time is really that place where you go when you know for a fact that you need to leave that alone to get to your next place, but you don't yet know how to get to your next destination. And so this book really is a collection of meantime experiences that are going to really help you understand where you are in your journey. It's going to be a reflective tool to help you chart your path, whether you're going through the particular situations now or you haven't faced them yet, because life is going to teach you the lessons. Okay. Life is going to teach you the lessons. Now, how well you absorb them and apply them will determine if you repeat it again and again and again. And depending on where you are in your life, your mean time may be extended if you don't get the lesson, because we all have to get to where we are meant to be. There is a predestined, I believe there's a predestined design for each one of our lives. And I do believe that we all have a spiritual contract to fulfill, the thing that we said we were going to do when we got here on earth. I do believe that. And so the time has been ticking, you know. You've been given, God has given you all the things. All right, now I let you do that thing you were interested in. You're coming up on the 12 o'clock hour, you know, and at the stroke of midnight, okay, your coach is gonna turn into a pumpkin because you got places to be. And so I feel very strongly that for me, it was time. And I believe that I knew that 40 was that anyway, because if I'm honest, I have been saying for the last 3 or 4 years that I was like, I think 40 is gonna be it when I tap out in corporate. I said, I think 40 is gonna be it because truly I've learned all that I can learn. I shouldn't say all that I can learn. I've learned the majority of what could be learned in a corporate setting. Now, there's gonna be some things that come, you know, that are gonna be new and that are gonna change, but the core of dealing with people, which is my thing, the core of teaching people, the core of learning and understanding in which ways can things and ways can improve people's lives. That's what I do, right? I do the mental work, and the mental enrichment. And so the things that I've learned, I'm like, I've already reached that cap. And so when this last job that I had began to feel like, okay, what else is there to do? I didn't know it was just about that particular job right at the time, but now that I'm looking back, I was like, okay, my time for that is just up. And it's been up for quite some time. The Lord and the universe were just waiting for me to understand that it was up. And so now it's time for you to do your thing. You know, it's time for you to do your thing. That is why you are thrust out into the world. That is why people resonate with you out in this social space in which you were hesitant to go into. You are meant to go out and do your thing now. And so that is the recurring one of the recurring themes that is happening for me right now is just like all of the things, all of the knowledge, all of the tools, all of the resources that I've accumulated throughout my life. It is clear to me that it's time for me to push all of that out. And that has shown itself in my creativity. My creativity today is bigger than it has ever been. I mean, much wider. Maybe as a child, the wonderment and the amazement and imagination was there, and I suppressed it at some point because life got real. But once I sat here in this room and started reading my work, and like I said, my spirit awakened. It's like my spirit said, and I took a deep breath and I felt everything just start pouring back. And I'm going to tell you this, how I knew my spirit reawakened and aligned to what it is that I was meant to do was that when I took those chapters back to the table, and actually it was not the table, it was the island in my kitchen because it's taller and I'm a taller guy. Once I sat down, I pulled my computer out and I prayed. I said, "Well, Lord, I know you want me to write this book and I know I'm supposed to write this book, but I need you to give me the words and I need you to give me the energy to do so." And I didn't hear anything right away. And I said, okay, we are just going to take this chapter here and we're just going to start writing. And it was almost as if something otherworldly began to take over because I started looking at the story I had already written. And next thing you know, my hands were just going and going, and the more I wrote, the more I felt just this purge of stories come onto the page. It was like my spirit said, "This is what I have been longing for." And I didn't know, I thought I would get tired of typing, but I'm like well into the 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and I'm like, "Oh my God." And by the time I got done with some chapters, I was so in awe of what I had done. I was like, I cannot believe that I have been sitting here for hours, hours writing this book. I was like, I just can't believe it. And I remember when that first chapter, because the first chapter was one of the longest chapters, when that first chapter got done, I started reading some of it and I said, don't read it. I said, don't read it because if you get caught up in reading it, you might start doing that perfectionist thing that you do. So I don't want you to interrupt your creative flow. Continue writing. And so I was like, okay, great. And I finished the chapter and I moved on to the next one the next day. And as I was getting ready, something said, read this part of the chapter. And so I started reading parts of the chapter that I was drawn to, that spirit was drawing me to, and again reignited. And then I was like, okay, next chapter. And then I would think it was going to be about one thing and I would start writing it, and somewhere between the first and second paragraph, the new story just, again, it just, and I started writing. And next thing you know, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, like there were so many moments that I was like, this is a reminder that this is what I was supposed to be doing. But also, as this was happening, I said something in a recording that you all will hear, but your identity is not found, it is remembered. And that is truly personified in my experience writing this book because my identity was always to be a storyteller. It was always to be a storyteller, it was always to be a writer. And when I started this process, I began remembering. I remembered loving English and writing and language composition. I remember loving those things growing up. I remember buying the Boxcar Children. I remember buying Goosebumps. I remember the scholastic days at school were some of my favorite times to figure out, which books I was going to get. And I had such a collection of books as a kid. I just loved the literature and I loved the adventure of it. I loved the story in it. And for whatever reason, as I got older, that shifted and life happened, of course, and that shifted and it got buried. But I started remembering that. I started remembering the times that I was writing and my teachers were telling me, are you sure you've written this? I can't tell you how many times a teacher has been like, "Are you sure you've written this?" And I'm like, "Yes, I wrote it." And they were like, "Well, no." Like I have poetry that is, like I said, from the 90s in there, right? And I'm a child of the 80s. And I have some from the 90s in there, and I can look at my penmanship and tell I was like, "Oh my God, I was so young when I wrote this." But I was writing about love, and I was writing about love from an outer perspective, because there were things that I had written that I imagined love would be like, and so I started kind of writing it from that perspective, and then also writing it from what I ingested from other people. And so what my mom said love looked like, or what she experienced in love, or my sister or somebody, I would ingest that and I would write about it, and all of it just kept flooding back to me. I remember, I think her name was Carol Ledbetter. I was in high school. If you've ever had a professor, I mean, not a professor, a teacher who is just very hard on everybody because they take their jobs very, very seriously. But I believe it was Carol Ledbetter, if I'm not mistaken. But she was one of those older teachers. She drank her coffee. She had her coffee stained teeth, and she was something serious. She never gave out A's in her class, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, you're gonna," one of those teachers. You may not even pass her class. And I was like, "Oh, okay," because she was a stickler about your writing, and your punctuation and things like that. And so for me, I wasn't afraid of her or anything like that. I just was like, "Oh, okay, fine." And so I was like, "I'm just gonna come in. I'm gonna do what I do, and I'm going about my business." I remember I remember she pulled me to the side one day. We had a paper that was due, and I wrote this paper the night before, you guys. I wrote this paper the night before. I was famous for that even in college. But I was writing the paper the day before it was due, and I turned it in, and I was like, "Oh gosh, this lady is probably, gonna give me a D or a C or something." I was like, "Fine, as long as I pass on the paper." But I turned the paper in. I came back to class whenever our next class was, and she told me to stay after class. She told me, and somebody else to stay after class. And I was like, "Oh crap, here we go. She's about to tell me this paper is not good enough." And so I stayed after class. She told the other person whatever she needed to tell him, and she let him go. And so then she sat there with me and she was like, "Mr. Bennett." I was like, "Yes." She was like, "Talk to me about your paper." And so I was telling her about the paper, and she was like, "So how long did it take you to write this paper?" Now, I thought to myself that she was on to me. I was like, "Oh my God, it's got to be poorly written because she's questioning she knows that I wrote it the night before." And I said, "Well, I did wait until the last minute and I procrastinated." I was like, "So, it may not be my best work or whatever." And she kind of looked at me confused, and she was like, honestly, this was one of the better papers I've read." And I was like, "Oh, really?" She was like, "I mean, it was so good in the depth and the detail in which you wrote it. I would have never guessed that you waited until the last minute to write the paper." And so when we discussed the grade, she gave me a A minus because there were a few things off with the format in the paper, but she gave me an A minus, and she said, "Listen, if you want to," I think she told me like, if you do some extra assignment, I will bump this up to a she said she wanted to give me another short writing assignment. She's like, "If you do that, I will give you extra credit and I will bump your official paper, your regular paper up to, an A plus." And now I didn't need the extra credit, so I was like, well, give me the assignment." But I probably did the assignment because I liked writing as a challenge, because there was a couple pieces in there that I had written, that are fictional pieces that I wrote as a challenge. But I say this because, and this is important because my spirit had reawakened to something that I was meant to do this whole time. And I started realizing things like submitting my poetry for contests. I used to submit my poetry for contests. I didn't have much money, but I would take a whatever I earned from cutting grass or delivering the newspaper, and I would use it to buy the books, and I would also use it to send my stuff off for these poetry contests. And I remember winning two of these contests, and they sent me a letter, and I kept the letters for a long time. Must have gotten rid of them. It's been a long time, but I remember there was one incidence where they said your poem was chosen out of I don't know how many, and it was like it will be featured in this book, On the Wings of Pegasus. And I do remember that, On the Wings of Pegasus. And I can't remember how much it would have cost me to buy the book, but at the time I didn't have it. It was probably like 30 or $40 maybe, I don't remember. But I didn't have 30 or $40. I just did not. And my mom wasn't giving it to me to buy some book that, a bunch of poems were in it, and then mine happened to be one of them. But they had gave me a recognition for that, and they were going to publish it. The poem that it is, to be honest with you, is about my brother's one of my brother's girlfriends that passed away. And so I wrote a poem which was really a kind of letter to her, and I had submitted it for the poetry contest. Her name was Summer, and so I wrote a poem called Summer. uh but anywho, not to get too caught up in that, because now I'm thinking about it. But I just remembered all of these things happening. And so I was like, how did I not remember that this was a thing? In all of my scouring and trying to brainstorm, I had even called my mom and we were texting back and forth, and I said, "Mom, do you remember what I wanted to be? Do you remember what I was interested in as a child?" And she named some of the things like, well, interior design. She said, I don't remember you saying it, but you love to redecorate the house. And I was like, yeah, I do remember, signing up for the Art Institute, but I didn't go. And then she was like, I mean, you did mention modeling at some point. I don't know whatever happened with that. And I was like, child, I can't model. Like I'm not the model type. Now today I could model because things are evolved and the style that I give, they probably would love it these days. But I was like, no, whatever. And I was like, she's like, I can't really think of anything. She's like, I can't really think of anything. And I said, okay. I asked her about, just things. Was I curious about anything? And she said no. So I went on about it like, I gotta be missing something because none of the things that she's saying resonated with me deeply. And I knew those things because other people had pointed those out to me. Oh, you could be a stylist. And I'm like, I just like to style myself. I don't really have a passion for styling other people unless we're together or we're friends and I'm just trying to help you get, your look together. Because some people look a mess. Now I could do it, but it's not my passion. It's not what fuels me to get up every day. And it's not the thing that if I did it for the rest of my life, I would feel completely fulfilled. So I didn't know what it was. And until that very day that I sat in here and that came back to me, I was like, ah. And I text my mom the next day and I said, Mom, in my mind, that's what I was doing. But mom, um, I wanted to be a writer. And she texted me back and said, well, it's not too late. And I said, you're right. I'm working on a book. And she was like, I can't wait to read it. And so that was a month or so ago. And so we are now here to where the book has been completely written and brought to life. And we are about to embark on a journey of releasing the book. And in writing this book, one day at a time, Life Lessons Love, I was already inspired to write a second book called Love in the Meantime and Success in the Meantime. And so it's going to be a series of books that come from this. And my hope is that if you are on your journey of becoming and you're on your journey of discovery, that this book enriches your life the same way in which it enriched mine, allowing me to focus on the thing that I was meant to do and that I was called to do. I'm going to read you the dedication, which is short for this book, but this is how I truly feel about this journey. I dedicate this book for every person learning to give themselves grace, choosing to heal at their own pace, and taking life one day at a time. So that is what I want for those of you who read the book. I want you to heal the things that you need to. And I want you to give yourself grace while you are discovering who you are through reflection of who you were. And as you realize that you haven't been kind to yourself, or you haven't been the best to yourself, or that you feel like you could have done better, that you give yourself grace for not knowing what you didn't know, for not doing what you knew maybe how to do, or knew that you should do but didn't know how to do. I want you to give yourself grace and I want you to keep the courage to keep going in the journey because there are going to be moments that are going to make you laugh wildly and there's going to be some that make you cry hard. There are going to be some moments where you're confused. There are going to be some moments where you want to throw your hands up and say, I give up like I did. Oh my God, kinda like at work, I used to be like, I quit at least once every other month. I used to quit every other month 'cause like, God, it's just driving me crazy. But I want you to take the time to to decompress, to love on yourself, to give yourself the motivation, the affirmation, and inspiration to do what it is that you are called to do. So if you don't know what that is, my hope is that this book helps you figure it out. If you are in your meantime right now with love, with relationships with family, with relationships with coworkers and all of those things, whatever it may be, my hope is that this book helps you along your journey figure out which way to go next and maybe something to leave behind that you didn't want to leave behind before. But hopefully, this book jars you to whatever it is that your next step is in your path. And I want you to know that even when it seems like the mountain is insurmountable and it is too high to climb, you can do it one day at a time. This has been the Michael Experience Podcast. I thank you all so much for the time today, and I will see y'all on the next one. We will continue talking about one day at a time because this series is going to be all about my book, One Day at a Time. So we'll dig into the themes of the book as well. So, y'all go on and have the most amazing rest of the day. Love on yourself before you can love on somebody else. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace and love, y'all. Bye.